So 10 minutes.
Well, 15.
Okay.
I never cut you short.
No, you never have.
No.
No, you never have. Okay. If you just sit down, this will be real quiet. We're recording. Last night, in preparation for the interview, I was reading a book about you. And the book contained all of these quotes from people who know you or who are friends of yours or associates, etc., etc., etc. And one of the remarkable things that comes through in the book is that just about everyone who was interviewed sees you in a different perspective, observes you in a different way. So the lead question, do you present the same Jack Nicholson to all the people that you meet?
Well, it's cliche to say so, but I don't actually present a Nicholson, you know. I think the reason for that is because whatever I'm doing, that's what it is. You know what I mean? In other words, I think it's not so hard if you know me to get to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so wherever I would be at that time, that would be your impression. You know, I think that's why you get a varied. I'm a varied person. Most people are, but I don't really present a specific person to people, for description or something.
But you wouldn't make a conscious effort, for instance, if you were dealing with business people as opposed to friends who...
Oh, I might do that, sure. I mean, as Willie Loman says, nobody loans money to a man with a sense of humor. But, sure. I mean, that would be part of the reason for it. In other words, someone would draw this particular character out of you. I think everybody's like that.
Is it difficult, since you've played so many characters, so many strong characters, differing characters on the screen, is there ever an occasion where the identity of those characters somehow interferes with your own perceptions of yourself?
Well, only in terms of that there's like a super image of me at large due to my work, and that image is fed back to me to respond to. So in that way I'm affected by it. But basically I think one of the nice things about being an actor is that you get to really explore something. You find something about yourself that you have in common with a character, and then you kind of dig at it and flop it out and throw it out. And in that way it sort of becomes a more objective experience for you and can either be burned away through the crucible of that experience, or enhanced, or
Mm-hmm.
at least it becomes more, more visible to you through having played it as a character. In that way, characters change you. I don't pick up much from the playing of a character that I carry over. A lot of things come to me from a character because that's the way I work, but I pretty much use them just during the duration of the shooting.
What character of them all was the most memorable? The one that you...
The one that affected me the most
Yes.
while I was playing it? Well, it's probably not the most memorable character, but characters like the King of Marvin Gardens, the character in that, because it's a slightly more of a stretch for me in my own personality. I got very muted and very kind of introverted during that period of time. We shot it in Atlantic City in the winter, which is kind of a very closed kind of experience anyway, and that kind of had, I went up to New York during the shooting of that for strange, but a combination of man through his own wake. And I noticed when I hit the big city, I hadn't until then, once I was up among all my friends and all, that I'd become very kind of quiet and shaky and couldn't talk to people, so that one affected me a lot. And then the one that's out now, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, being in that institution all day affected me a lot. But in a way, in that it calls more on you to be more specifically what you are. When somebody in that situation talks to you, you're not so casual. How are you means
Mm-hmm.
how are you, not hello. And that affected me a lot. Positively, I just did this Western, Missouri Breaks, and I loved getting to play cowboy. That was kind of a larky experience where you're outdoors and you get real horsey and all that.
That one you did with Marlon Brando.
Right, with Brando.
What was the? You're going to be asked this experience a lot, and I'm probably jumping ahead one motion picture in your life, but maybe I'll ask it for the first time. Well, it sounds cliche, but what was it like the first time you met him on the set? What was it like working with him?
Well, as you know, he lives right over
the
here.
block, yeah.
Yeah, so I had, fortunately, because I think I would have been knocked on the ground by his presence, I had some experience talking with him. We're a little bit friendly. But it's great, it's like anything, who wouldn't want to work with Brando if they're an actor, it's inspiring, it's provocative. He's great at what he does, and if you do, it's like with a musician. If you sit down and you start playing with somebody that's really good, you know it right away, and you do better. And I think he affected pretty much everybody in the company that way. He was real good. He was tuned up to work. It wasn't a heavy thing in his mind this time. And he told me the last day shooting, we went for a long ride, and he said that it was the second movie that he's ever actually enjoyed doing of. Yeah.
What was the first?
The first one was Bedtime Story. He thought David Niven was very funny.
You did 19 movies before Easy Rider in '69. You've done 14 films since.
Jesus, is it that many?
Yeah,
My
you've done
God.
33 motion pictures.
So they've been asking, I used to know the number, they've been asking me lately. I always place it somewhere between 20 and 30, but that's
it's now up to 33.
Well, I might hit 200.
Of the 33, what's your favorite?
I'm asked that a lot. I've stayed away from making lists on stuff. I pretty much have enjoyed everything that I've done since I had some say in what it is that I do. And, it's hard to choose between them. Obviously, audiences have responded differently, and that affects how you feel about it. But I have no complaints. I've always worked with good directors, and it's always been stimulating. And
what about, you've been nominated now for 4 Academy Awards, and probably a 5th after this year. You've been in attendance at the Oscar ceremonies. One day I prematurely called you and congratulated you before the telecast.
Right. Well, I've had a lot of congratulations on it.
Everybody who watches the Oscar telecast, when they have the screen cut and you see the faces of all of the people as the names are about to be announced, and they cut away for the winner, you never see the expression on the faces of the people who have just lost.
Because it's too small. Television's too small
to carry that expression.
Right.
You went to the ceremonies, so somewhere in the back of your mind there must have been the assumption that they were going to give you the statue.
Not only the assumption, but my deepest fear. Actually, the only thing that would ever make me nervous at that is to have to walk up in front of all those people. I like to act, but I'm not much of a performer, and that makes me that single idea is the thing that has given me the most of the tension from that. And a couple of times I thought I had a decent shot to win. I've never been shocked that I didn't win so far. They're sort of like, in a way, once you're down to voting for 5 things, it doesn't matter what they are. You should be able to handicap it, and most times you can. I've pretty much picked the winner all the times I've been there.
Including the times that you were nominated?
Yeah.
Unlike some of the others, you do not put down that system. You do not find fault with the nature of giving awards for best performances.
No, it's I think it'd be silly. It's the people that see movies like it. It seems, otherwise it wouldn't draw that audience that it does. And it sort of was there when I got here. I didn't create it. I'm very impressed with the list of artists and technicians that have won it. So you can't really knock it all away. And it is what it is. I think everybody's talked about it by now, and it is what it is. It's a great promote. It helps the movies that win, and that's really what it's about. I'm interested in that. I don't think you can have a realistic attitude about being the best actor as such, because everyone has also said that there's just too many actors doing too many things for that to ever really be the case. But they've honored a lot of very fine performers, and I would look at it that way. I could attack it and say it's this and say it's that. But what's the point? It works for what it is, and in that sense I support it. It's glamorous. I think people need that. I think I was at a dinner recently where the guy, Henry Gruenwald, who's the editor of Time magazine, he talked about the relationship between hard news and show business, and that they mutually exploited one another. Hollywood for obvious reasons, and the news media to give you some news that's not totally abysmal every day. And I think that that's the kind of area that the Academy should be viewed as fun. You know, it was an inspiration to me as an aspiring actor. You know, I mean, I had all the fantasies, you know, of I'll get in there and do. But once you're working along and doing whatever work that you want to do, it can't help. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've never won one, so I don't really know. But I mean, it seems to me that you know, I'm not driven by it now, for sure.
It occurs to me, even sitting and talking with you now, you are considered by so many people, not just the general public, but critics as well, as one of the great living American actors now. And your rise to, you know, incredible stardom over the past 5 or 6 years has just been meteoric, more than perhaps anybody else. Yet there is something about you, and I don't say this in a derogatory fashion, that is very un-movie star-like, very un-Redford-like, that there is still, you're still here in the same house you've always had?
I think I had the advantage of coming at it from a well-established position. You know, I mean, I've been living here now over half my life. I've been in the movie business since 1955, which is 20 years. I started out at MGM. I saw every great movie star that ever existed that was still alive working there. I've known a lot of actors. First show I ever did, 3 actors went right on to national television series. They were immediately successful. I saw how it affected their lives. Innumerable people in acting classes. I've gotten to meet people through other things. I was writing, producing. I hadn't directed yet, but was trying to get to do that before this thing happened with Easy Rider. And so I just think I had it's really a good piece of luck in being fairly well formed and knowing what was happening and what it meant before I got to it. And
was it pretty much? Excuse me.
You know, I mean, a lot of people like Redford, whom I don't know, but Warren, whom I do. It's very hard to learn to be an actor in front of the public, and people who hit that very early, they don't have the advantage that I have of doing a lot of bad things and embarrassing things and seeing people, watching people at parties from an anonymous point of view, and you know, all that just, you know, I think anybody with a sort of a sensible nature would react to it as I have. I think I'm in an enviable position in that I don't have to project a movie star image. I really don't.
No, you don't.
I mean, it's so well publicized now that I'm not a movie star image, and that I'm not, you know, some of the descriptions I read of myself in the media, I'm also quite gnome-like and unattractive, so I have not, you know, I have nothing to lose or to project, so I'd be silly not to take advantage of it, because it bothers people. Most of the people that are doing it, they're uptight by it, you know, I mean, it's too much at a certain point, or they go home and wonder if they did it right. You know, I never have any of that. I have never had it, and it's just luck. I mean, I can't even say it has to do with me. It's just luck.
Do you ever worry about it passing? Do you ever worry about the time when...
In theory, I wouldn't call it worry, but I wonder, you know, Angelica's starting to work now, and I'm always threatening her to walk off into the ocean in my old bathrobe, like Norman Maine. But you know, I mean, so all actors have all the actors' fantasies, and everybody says, well, you know, I'm thinking, well, geez, it probably won't bother me because I don't have it to begin with of this kind. It's sort of within my control. I don't have a press man, so that's all within my control. The jobs that I do are sort of by mutual consent, not by, you know, proselytizing. So I think maybe it won't bother me, but on the other hand, there may be something there that I'm getting that I don't know, that once it's gone, I'll miss it terribly. Who the hell? I read something that seemed to me. an actor that was traveling who came here and he said, geez, I've been doing all this work and very happy. And I got to Los Angeles where I used to live and someone says, what are you doing? And suddenly I was enormously depressed by my career. So that element could creep in. But God, I hope not. I've gotten so much out of it. I hope that it passes on. I'm sitting down at work today. I was thinking about actors getting older. What it is that creates an impression. I'm working with Bob De Niro down here, and an actress who hasn't worked before, and they've just gotten done working with Mitchum, and there's kind of his aura around, and Tony Curtis, and I'm sitting there and I'm realizing, a lot of it just has to do with how old you are and how you've approached it. And one thing we do know, we'll all get older, and the audience is really, ultimately, I think with most performers, and in this way actors are in that category, they're some ways attracted by the sexuality. And once you're older, the appeal of that image is minimized, and you have to expect that. It's just the facts, so I'm expecting it.
Outside of the idiom of movies, what about fears of age in general? Do you think about growing old? Do you worry about it?
No, I've never worried. For instance, I've always sort of played, the last 10 years or so, I've always played older as an actor. When I meet people, they're either alarmed at my size or my age or something like that. So I like the idea. Nobody wants to die right away, but I've always liked being older, really. I mean, I guess I'm one of those people who has always pretended that he's older anyway. So it's attractive to me. I'm not frightened by it.
One is obviously aware of the advantages of your position, your stature. What are some of the disadvantages of being Jack Nicholson?
Well, I'm basically a very polite person, particularly with strangers. And it's the old cliches of being a known person. I mean, I'm also very good at ducking that, and because the parts that I play, I try and have different images and look differently. I'm not as prey to it as a rock and roll star or something like that. But it's tough. It bugs other people, the people coming over to you, and they're always well meant. They always say, I'm really sorry, I know this is a drag, is always the preface. But it is, it's a fairly constant thing. That's a slight disadvantage. I'm also someone who contests their own silence. I don't always feel like I have to talk. And that's hard because that's kind of puts more pressure on people if you're a known person. And then it's someone that they know not talking to them or not relating to them. And that's a disadvantage. I guess, there are people who don't like what you do or don't like what you represent to them, and they sometimes, choose to express themselves. And that's a disadvantage. But I mean, I'm really going far afield. None of this bothers me much because, as I say, I try and, go where I know I'm going to like it.
What about the effect of the enormous wealth, the millions and millions and millions?
Well, a lot of these I've always advised my friends, and I think I do it myself. Something like that has a lot of mystique. Really can be an enormously educational experience when it becomes an actuality. While I'm talking to you, I think I'm doing real good financially. All of the signs are there, but the reality is I may not be. I mean, I may be one of these cases where people out there. So what I'm saying is I'm not in complete touch with it. I've tried to learn something about having all that money move through your life in some way and orchestrate it and try and use it for personal nourishment and things that I like to do. I have a few people who depend on me, and that's easier because there's no pressure in that. I can actually deal with it. There's always the burden of feeling like you're doing well financially. You don't, you worry about others who are not. Basically, I've used it mainly to just really improve my own life situation, really.
There's just a point here, perhaps of misunderstanding with the people who'll be listening to us. Is it that you might not be aware of the amount of money that you make and where it goes?
Well, it's just the fact that you sign pay. I mean, I don't ever get to see the money sitting in the room. I mean, I got this house, and
right.
I have a bank account and a couple of investments and so forth. But you don't really get in touch with that kind of money somehow. As long as you're working. You're going from one thing to the next, and you're told by people that, business manager and what have you, that you're doing well or you have to do better. I think, don't misunderstand me, I think of a lot of the people who go through this experience that, like the other experience, I'm doing it fairly well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not, I think that most of the older people that I've known who have been successful people in their life, unless they've gotten into some kind of statistically impossible situation of income, they will tell you that basically your wealth is based on what you're able to earn right now. That's the real way that it affects you. Investments and so forth is really capital and has to do with a whole other way of thinking.
But is it not a fact, though, that, and I don't mean to belabor the subject, but people are always curious about the money. You could make a telephone call tomorrow to a business manager or so-and-so and ask them, how much do I have in the bank?
Yeah, I have a meeting every year.
So
I look at it and see what it's supposed to be. But again, it's paper in a way.
So as of right now, you do not feel financially secure that you can stop now? And
I do feel financially secure, but it is based on trust.
Interesting.
See?
Interesting.
I mean, there'll come a time, my nature is there'll come a time, once I feel like I really hit it, that I'll call it all in and I will concretize it, because that's also my nature. But I haven't reached that moment yet.
Two more points, then I'll let you go, because I know you're going to be late. I want to read a quote to you that I read last night, that a friend of yours allegedly spoke about you. Let me just read the quote and get your reaction to it. The friend speaking of you, and I know the friend too, and I know he does know you, says of Jack Nicholson, quote, "He's profoundly lonely, permanently alienated, absolutely brilliant, and the nature of his brilliance confirms his isolation because it's the kind that's very hard to touch. He forces himself to escape from himself."
And what am I to do?
Your reaction to the
My
quote.
reaction to the quote? Well, I like it because it's something I mightn't think of myself, and yet I feel in some way it's something that someone is describing about me. I wouldn't like to think that I was permanently alienated, although there's a part of me that thinks everyone is permanently alienated, so I would fall into it in that category. Good evening.
It'll be all right.
Oh, all right. We'll just let it ring. It's distracting me terribly.
Rest for a moment.
Why don't you pick that up?
It's fine.
Someone picked it up.
About being permanently alienated.
Yeah, I'm almost 40 now. I've had a lot of relationships that seem to have been forever, that aren't even there at all anymore. That becomes part of yourself and your experience, that kind of impermanent feeling. My family was very small, so I'm sort of formed in a self-reliant way, intentionally by the family, which I think is very intelligent. I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm rarely alone, though, Elliot. I have an enormous amount of very good friends, and I see them a lot, and we communicate a lot and well and easily. But, my recurring fantasy as an actor has always been that I would be drunk in the gutter somewhere by myself, disgraced for some reason that I can't foresee now and so forth. That's the ultimate fear. And so in that way, I think what he means is I keep the ability to be alone alive, even when it's not necessary. And I don't know if that's smart or wise or what, but I do know that it seems to be a part of my nature.
Interesting. What about, you're very big these days in the gossip magazines, the fan magazines, all that Hollywood stuff. I don't know how often you go to the drugstore and look through them, but it's part of my work, and I have to investigate these matters, of course. And it's always this business about you being linked with this lady or this lady. And all of your relationships with women have been widely publicized. I know not by your own doing. You don't have press agents, and you don't cultivate photographers and the rest of it. How do you feel about that very personal part of your life receiving international exposure? And how close did any or do any of these relationships come to being the kind of thing that you are truly seeking?
Well, the real ones, not the publicized ones, I really have almost no regrets. I've had pretty much good relationships with women, difficult certainly, but there haven't been that many of them. I would say I've gotten a lot out of my relationships with women. I think I would be a pretty tough bird if it weren't for that kind of softening effect that a woman has on every man. It's that thing of when a lot of men are around, they get kind of crusty with one another. It's just automatic. I think it's very natural, in fact. And I think that a woman really softens a man up, and I think that men need to be so. So I would say I've gotten good things. All the women have had very good concepts about what the flaws in my characters are, and the force and the perception to communicate them, and that it's good for me. As far as the gossip magazines, that comes with the job. You know me for years. There's no point in complaining with something that by definition is a part of something that you yourself have sought. Again, it's something that I certainly knew about beforehand, so it'd be ridiculous for me to complain about it. Now, I don't read them. Somebody just told me on the phone that I'm being publicized having an affair with Cher now in England as we sit here. I've only seen her 10 minutes in the last year, so it goes on, and I suppose it doesn't bother me, as long as the people who know me know what's happening, no problem.
You are remarkably, as you've heard this before, remarkably unaffected by all this extraordinary stuff that has happened around you, and I've interviewed now almost 2,000 people, many of whom have touched the star that you're feeding off of, and I still, I'm always in awe of the way that you're able to deal with it so well, and I'm also so appreciative that we always have these moments to visit.
Yeah, well, I like talking to you, Elliot. You've always been good to me.
And you to I.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Jack Nicholson.